Thank you all for coming here. Thanks for the wonderful song and sharing that wonderful testimony of crying out to God in dark times. And we're still back in Hosea.
Yep.
I actually was researching how many minutes and how many hours that's already been recorded that we studied this, and it's been over 12 hours of recorded Bible study.
Wow.
We have not made it to chapter 10. But that's it. We're diving into God's Word so we can better know God and have Him know us and purge us from anything that separates us from God. Get closer. So we're in chapter 9. We're going to let's go back to verse 12. That's where we left off last time. I like a little overlap so we can cross over and ease into anything. So chapter 9, verse 12. Though they shall bring up their children, yet I will bereave them. This is God. This is God punishing them for their constant being drawn away from Him. That there shall not be a man left. Woe also to them that depart from them. This is probably most likely dealing with the children that are dying here. Most of them are either dying off due to disease, but they also, they sacrifice their children here. But I like to think of it in the context of our modern day, that the world really wants to destroy us as masculine Christian men. And what that song to me was speaking about is how much we are our own worst enemy. Our desires of our heart completely go contrary to what God wants us to be. And what we want to be is not God's sense of what is masculine or feminine at all. And I don't like to focus on gender roles on any sense, not because of political correctness, just because there's a lot of misinformation, I'll put, a lot of misinformation. But we see in today's society that there's not a lot of men willing to step up to be godly men in any sense. And we see our society trying to rewrite what's feminine. That means you need to focus on your career and your career above all else. I'm like, what? You can even see in the Bible, it doesn't say that you're not supposed to not have a career. It talks about them owning their own businesses and being pretty good entrepreneurs if you listen to the Bible. Owning and selling stuff that are produced from the family farm kind of deal, but going a little bit off topic there. But I would like to translate for the modern day, saying that it's like Satan really wants to destroy masculine men and just sit down and not speak out for the Word of God. Just be pacified by your beer and football. You can see Satan's game plan today a little bit in verse 12. Let's go into 13. Ephraim, yet again, these are the northern 10 tribes. These are the northern 10 tribes that is being nicknamed Ephraim, and I'm going to go into a little bit about the name of Ephraim because I'm still shocked that I have not really done a deep study on that name. And we're what? This is going to be the 14th time that we showed up for this. We will just a little bit further into this, but he says, Ephraim, as I saw Tarshish. And Tarshish actually means rock. Tarshish. Yeah, Tarshish. Which I found kind of interesting. And it says that it was planted in a present place. It's planted in an oasis. So God's comparing Ephraim to Tarshish here. It's in a pleasant place. It's good. It's not hostile to you. If you're in a hostile environment, it's hard to live. It's very stressful. People do bad things under stressful circumstances. So he's saying you don't have that excuse here. But Ephraim shall bring forth their children to the murderer. Like, this is harsh. It's like you're in a good place. You're not under distress. Like, you hear horror stories of what happens in famines and what they would do to make things convenient. But he's like, you're in a good place. But instead of having a happy home that protects a child, it's destruction to them. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at America. We're supposed to be the wealthiest, most stable, first world country. We should have happy homes, willing to bring in, if we're families, bring in children. We bring them to the murderer. What should be their most protected people, their parents and doctors, are now them sentencing them to death before they can speak. It's pretty dark. The same sort of stuff's going on there. They give birth to them and then hand them off to Baal to be sacrificed. And I'm going to go to John chapter 8 for some more context, I believe, about Baal, not Baal, but the murderer. If someone else is called the murderer in our Bible, interesting concept of bring forth our children to the murderer. Chapter 8, verse 44. And ye are of your father, the devil. He was talking about the Pharisees at the time. The devil. And the lust of your father ye will do. And he was the murderer from the beginning. Interesting statement that we have here. And abode not in the truth. So interesting that is another aspect of being a murderer. Because there is no truth in him. When he speak a lie, he speak of his own. We speak out of ourselves. We tend to speak lies. We have a society that's all about, well, in my opinion, that's okay. I feel this way about this opinion. I was talking to a lady at work, and she was supposing to know God. I'm sitting here, it's like, to me, it's not my feelings, it's not how my time period is. To me, if it's written, that's what I need to stand on. And they were having a hard trouble struggling with that, because it's like, well, I feel like you don't have to go to church, or feel like this is okay. It's like, no, you speak on your own. I mean, you're going to be false. You're fallible. You're human. God isn't. If we can learn to accept His ways and accept His word as His life, it says it's a light unto our path. Things are a whole lot harder to stumble over. We take them seriously. Me included, sometimes I don't. We got to let that changes from the inside out there. But he says, it considers Satan to be the first murderer. And we know in our mind that if you hate someone, you can commit murder, right? So I'm taking this idea to a little bit of extent. It's like, who do we hear Satan murder? We think about the first murderer, we think about Cain, right? I'm sitting here and thinking, well, idolatry, I don't want God. Ain't that pretty much, I hate God? I want to put something in His place. I want to murder God in a way. I want Him off that throne, because that's where He sits all the time, regardless of if I feel that way or not. Right? So if I'm going to be idolatrous, if I want my way, because what is Jesus? He says He is the way. Throughout the Bible, you hear some weird statements where it says, but you do your way. You do it your way. But when we try to put ourselves in the throne of God, it's like we hate Him. It's pretty much deicide. In our hearts, we want to kill or dethrone God because we wish to put ourselves in that place or something else. So in my idea, that concept of Satan being the first murderer, because he was the first one to say, it'd be nice to knock God off that throne, knock Him off a peg, and then establish myself there. We think that the first sin, or the fall of man, was in the Garden of Eden, and it was humanity. But we got to think, Satan had that scheme from the get-go. He started this disease, and we picked it up. But yet again, delivering our children to the murderer, taking God out of the school, are we teaching our children more satanic ideas, where it's all about your pleasure, your happiness? Or are we going to teach them godliness, where it's about seeking the kingdom, seeking God? Everyone's about, as long as you're happy, you're not hurting anyone. It's like there's better things than happiness. Not seeking righteousness, to be right with God. You read throughout the entire Bible multiple times, and there's a lot of people that are pretty much miserable at the first half of whatever their life is. We're going to hear about Jacob eventually, if I can have some, if I get there. We're going so slow. But, no, Joseph. We're going to talk about Joseph. And Joseph had a pretty tough life. He was not looking, I mean, it wasn't his happiness that it was first. Sold into slavery by his family to go live in Egypt and then be framed for sleeping with your master's wife. I mean, it's horrible. You think his happiness was the first thing he was thinking about. It's like, but people are lying that I did this thing, but I'm the only one that knows what truly happened in that room. Willing to say that. But he kept staying true to God, like true to the kingdom. And eventually, he was used to not only save his own family, but the people who enslaved him. What kind of love is that?
Right.
It's very interesting. Reminds me of the story of St. Patrick, but it's a different story there. Not the Bible either, so we got a context of who the murderer could be. Satan manipulating things. We know in their time, in Hosea's time, it was idolatry to Baal. They're delivering straight from birth to the hands of a fiery idol that will burn them up. Context for today, are we handing our children over to grow godly or selfish and follow right into the kingdom below? Interesting. So let's go on to verse 15 here. And all of their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them. For their wickedness of all their doings, and I will drive them out of my house, and I'll love them no more, and all their princes are revelers, or rebels. To me, I gotta go study. So what on earth is Gilgal supposed to mean? It actually means it's a circle of stones, standing stones. They'll do it for a place of remembrance. They did that when they crossed over the Jordan for the first time. They placed out stones. So this is why we have a little bit of difficulty of knowing exactly where they're talking about. Because there's a lot of different places where they put up standing stones. Another kind of term that they have for stuff like this, we see somewhat in 1 Samuel 7:12, referring to Samuel put up a stone and he called it an Ebenezer. That's where he kind of got like Ebenezer Scrooge. It was a stone for remembrance. Like two people will make a promise. You're like, long as this stone is our witness of what our promise is. We even studied further back in Hosea, where it was talking about the kings would move the standing stones that would represent boundary lines. So you'd have farm plots, and they would have boundary lines, and they would have the stones to remind them where the boundary lines are. And the kings would, for a fee, be like, okay, you pay me. You want more land? There's no real land between you, so I'll just shift them over, steal from your neighbor. So we're not for sure exactly where this Gilgal is, because there's a lot of standing stones that could fit this definition. I, though, have a suggestion that it might be referenced in 1 Samuel 11:12. And 1 Samuel, it talks a lot about the kingdom being established. The people would prefer not God to rule over them, but a king. It's like, let's be like everyone else. Let's go establish a king over us. And he's like, dude, hold on. You know, if we have a king, you're going to be taxed, right? And here we are today. It's like, you'd think that would be a good enough rationalization. Like, dude, he's going to tax you. He's going to take your men out to war and take your women for servants. Dude, you really want this? Like, no. And he's like, yeah, we definitely want a king. And we see where King Saul, which is the first king over Israel before he gets split back in 11:15. If I ever get there. We see that in a place called Gilgal, they actually made him king there. And all the people went to Gilgal, and they were there. They made Saul king before the Lord, and Gilgal. And there they sacrifice sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord, and there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced. I'm thinking that when they're saying from all their wickedness is from Gilgal, and then at the end of the verse they say, your princes are revelers. He says, I don't like your kingdoms. I don't like your kings. Your royal family is garbage. They're revelers. They're rebels. And you know who else is a rebel? Satan's been a rebel from the get-go against God, an adversary of God. So I think that's a good guess. We don't have it exactly, so I'm not going to say, hey, that's an absolute canon, you better believe that. But I think it makes an interesting argument. Context of both of them, that it's probably the kingdoms God's mad at. And even further into chapter 10, we're gonna see some of that come to fruition, if we will. Okay, go down to 16 here in Hosea chapter 9. Ephraim is smitten, and their root is dried up. Ephraim is referencing to the idea of fruitfulness. Joseph was in Egypt, and he lived there in Egypt. He did not know if he would ever see his family again. He eventually marries and has 2 kids, one of them being called Ephraim, and he says, God has let me be fruitful. It's a hostile land. He started as a slave, and eventually he works up to the right-hand man of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh don't want to do many full-time works. He's a figurehead. He's relaxing. So he really gives a lot of authority to Joseph. A little bit more than just saying, hey, he's like vice president. He's just like, you're the sitting intermediary. If I don't like it, I can step in, but no one else can say anything against you. God's made him fruitful in a very hostile land. So God names his child Ephraim, which means fruitfulness, or some people translate it to double fruit. Or fruit, abundant fruit here. We get the context of how those words could fit. But God names these northern kingdoms Ephraim. It's a nickname. Calling back. They should look in their Torah and see what that meant. And he says their root is dried up. Well, if the root's dried up, you're not bearing much fruit now. That vine's going to wither away. And they shall bear no fruit. Though ye have bared fruit, ye will I slay, even your beloved fruit of your womb. It's talking about how it feels like here is like you keep killing your children, and eventually it's going to result in infertility. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I know a lot of people even my age that fear they're infertile. We don't know generations of different medicines that we have taken and our lifestyle to value children, of how that has affected both men and women. Mm-hmm. I personally know several men that have went to me after being friends and being like, dude, I'm older than you, and I'm jealous that you have a kid, pretty much. Not hatefully, but like, I wish I could too. I don't know if I can. That's scary. You don't have many men start to admit, like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to have a family. And we don't know if that's a side effect of our society's, who knows? I mean, do we have hundreds of years of study on what birth control does to the offspring? I don't know. But like, it's a possibility that like our denying growth in families could result in this. And I see some evidence of that. I mean, I pray for them. Hard thought. So God's going to bereave the children, slay the fruit of their womb, which yet again, that was the promise to Abraham, wasn't it? You're going to be fruitful. You're going to have many children. And then eventually they're just like, I don't know. Like, I would rather have money. It's like, but this is real fruitfulness. This is happiness. And like, can you look back in all those memories and feel way more fuller than a pocket full of cash?
You know, it's our responsibility in each generation to give the gospel and to teach our kids the Bible. And when, as a parent, fails to do that in their family, then it drops off at each generation until, God comes in and saves that family and then pours that back into them.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's why I'm very scared about my generation and what their kids are going to be. And eventually they're going to vote in our nation. And that's terrifying. But we also see this, and it's kind of very secular, actually. We see always a political swing. When one side goes way too extreme, then you see younger generations want to swing back. And I don't want it to be a swing. I want you to be always on fire. But it does sometimes encourage me to see people tired of strict atheism completely devaluing human life. Because you're just an animal, right? You put a human and a grizzly bear in a cage match, and one's going to be food if you don't got a gun. So bears be in charge when driving cars?
I would say.
Just saying. So if I'm an atheist, shouldn't that be allowed? I will keep saying, Hitler may be wrong with who was the dominant race, but he was a really good atheist. Well, he wasn't an atheist, but he was a really good evolutionist. That's what, if you believed it, when you'd be let it turn. This is the means in which we get the next race. Now they won't tell you that, but that is exactly what evolution is. Die and let someone else take over. Christianity says you matter because you are an image bearer of God. It doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter your mental capability. It doesn't matter if you're handicapped in any way. You're supposed to image God. You have more value than the bald eagle egg. I'm sorry. If there's more of you people, you can actually take care of the planet even more. If we get you saved and truly appreciate God and appreciate what He gives you. So, okay. Stop caring about climate change and start caring about souls. Because they'll start taking care of the planet a whole lot more. If you're a Christian, you would care. But you know what? Humans matter way more. This planet will fade away. Point blank. Even scientifically. Everything's going to wipe out. The sun's going to engulf the earth. So, too bad for the concept of reincarnation, where you're reincarnating if things are gone. Doesn't matter. I would like this wheel to keep spinning a little longer, only to save more souls. And you see, God keeps pushing it back and pushing it back because He is long-suffering to us. It keeps saying, it's but isn't God, He's lax. He's slacking. Where is God? We've said that for 2,000 years. He's supposed to come back. Is He lazy? Is He asleep? No, He's not lax concerning His promise. He says, I'm long-suffering. He was long-suffering through a lot of stuff. Long-suffering through the Civil War, long-suffering through World War II, long-suffering through all the garbage we got in America today, too.
Amen. True that.
Long-suffering through 9/11. 3,000 people die due to planes crashing in. Long-suffering every day because 3,000 babies are chemically burned, ripped apart. A day. There's a 9/11 happened a day in America alone. But He's long-suffering and loves even those mothers who have said, off with their heads, literally. Because He loves them as much as He loved that baby that just ain't there anymore. Yeah. He wants them to come to the grips of the reality of it, come to repentance. And there's some benefit for that, to be knowing about being on the end of that device that killed the child. Because there's doctors right now that have turned and testify of, there's no way that there's just a mass of cells. I've counted the fingers. You'd think the worst atrocities can't be forgiven, but God will forgive them and then use it as the weapon to destroy this device of death and decay and pure evil. Look at John Newton being a slave ship captain, taking African slaves to America. Ship crashes. The slaves that he didn't view as human, rescue him. And he goes on to write Amazing Grace. He can't deny their humanity when they're the ones who granted him an extra a few years of breath. And that's only God. Very merciful, more than we actually deserve. And I'm trying to see what that had to do with what I said. That's God. I love it. Yep, we're at chapter 9, 17.
Yep.
My God will cast them away because they did not hearken unto him and draw to him. Through all these troubles, didn't hear his voice. And he says, they shall be wanderers among the nations. And we see that today. We really do. Even this commentator states that both Joseph and Mary, even though they were supposed to be the tribe of Judah, which weren't affected by this, ended up were living in Galilee, which would have been the northern kingdoms. How did they stay out of their land? They were cast abroad and just got drawn back. We see Jews coming out of the woodwork everywhere. Everyone's getting their DNA test at, like, was it 23andMe or whatever it is, and then they're coming back. It's like, wow, I actually have Jewish heritage on this side of the family. I never knew it. It's because they were scattered abroad, and there's actually kind of like an amazing kind of prophecy or effect that I'm actually going to go into about this idea that there's Jews abroad everywhere, across many nations. Let's kind of go into that. I've already kind of hinted to this idea. Let's go over what Ephraim means. And then we'll see this. So the northern 10 tribes are Ephraim, and this also refers to Joseph's son who went into bondage into Egypt, his second son. We're going to actually read some of that in Genesis 48. 19 is kind of a quick one-verse statement, but I don't like those. But for your respect to your own time, I'll say if you want later, read 48 to get a full context, but we'll target that 19 to get what's going on. So, at this point in the story about Joseph, Joseph's married, his family's finally in Egypt with him because of the famine that was going on. They drawed him there. And he finally actually got to meet his father. I believe that was Jacob, which got his name changed to Israel. I got this whole family tree sidetrack stuff because it's very interesting. You got Abraham, and ends up getting Ishmael, which is not the son of the promise, but the firstborn. Interesting. Isaac, who is not the firstborn, but gets the birthright because he's the son of the promise. Wow, amazing. Because we always hear that the firstborn gets the birthright and all that. That's weird. Then he has children, Esau and Jacob, but Esau kind of pulls his son back, his brother back in a fight, gets out first, supposedly gets the birthright. Jacob cheats and gets it. So the secondborn technically gets the birthright. Really weird, right? Let's continue. So Jacob, which gives his name to Israel, he eventually goes, has a bunch of children, wants to have children with his true love. Rachel eventually gets Joseph, not the firstborn, but the promise follows through him. The world wants to say the firstborn gets all this stuff in that culture, but God says, I want to circumvent your expectations here. Yep. The whole way through. And we even continue this a little further. So Joseph goes to Israel, not Israel, getting nouns messed up, Egypt. And, through all these weird events, because it's not a Bible study on Genesis, he eventually saves not only his own family, but Egypt from a famine with really good agricultural planning. I wish we could get this guy voted in as our agricultural specialist for America, but oh well. really good planning, thanks to God helping him. And he eventually goes back with, his father meets, and he's asking his father to bless his firstborn, essentially. And we read in chapter 48 of Genesis, verse 19, and his father refused. Really weird here, this idea that this circumventing expectation here. Refused and said, I know it, my son, because he was pretty much saying, he even starts out saying, like he has bad eyesight. That's what he pretty much used to trick his own father, right? This is interesting. He had really bad eyesight, and he tricked him with the hair. But even though he's old and he's about to bless his grandchildren, which is wonderful to see generations growing up through that, he's like, no, I know, it's not a trick. I know I'm blind. I know, because God told me here. I know it's true. He will also be a people, as in Manasseh, which is the older brother here. He'll be a people. There's still the promises over him. And he will also be great. But truly, his younger brother shall be greater than him, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Now, I bring that all up to go back to what we just read in the tail end of Hosea chapter 9. What is being called Ephraim is now going to be wanderers in all nations. Isn't this interesting parallel here? Going to become all nations because they're going to get assimilated into them. I just find it interesting. All the way in Genesis, there's a parallel where God's referencing these things. Become many nations. Well, Israel's going to get into these cultures, and maybe they'll know a little bit of the one true God, and this is preparation eventually for the gospel to go out in Jesus' time. There has to be like a foreshadow, an echo to that. Because we see little bits and pieces in other religions of, that seems a little Christian. Why did you get that? Here, there. This could be a reason why. God preparing them to accept the truth. That's a little bit guessy, but it's interesting how that worked out. And finally get into chapter 10. 4 more to go. 4 more to go. Chapters, and at this rate, who knows? Okay, so chapter 10 of Hosea, verse 1. Israel is an empty vine. There's that fruitfulness symbolism there. Empty vine. And he beareth forth fruit unto himself. We always talk about this idea of selfishness not being very godly. Israel is supposed to be a symbol to the nations. The nations are supposed to be enticed to Israel to know God. They're not being godly, therefore they're not doing their job. Therefore they're not truly fruitful. It's kind of like that person that knows about Christianity and won't ever testify about it. You hold it to yourself. It's the parable of when the Lord gave his servants treasure. It's like, I'm going to go, please invest it somewhere. And the guy buries it and hides it and does nothing with it. Israel's doing that. But what he buries over knowing God is the multitude of sin in his life. Because it's really hard to testify to God when you know you got things in your closet.
Amen.
It's true. And even once you've asked for forgiveness over those things, it might be hard because then people want you to be perfect, which is, Christians ain't going to be perfect. You keep pretending to be perfect and fooling yourself. But a lot of people think, yeah, you should be perfect. And it's hard to testify. But that's what we're seeing here, is that fruitfulness. They're keeping it to themselves. According to the multiply of their fruit, they have increased their altars, their religiousness that they're having. According to their goodness in the land, which this could be more secular, like money, like actual wealth going on here, they have made goodly images, their idols, their secular worship that kind of cover these things, because sin just keeps growing and gets worse and worse to like cover itself here. And we know they multiplied their altars and their images. We've studied more about that in previous chapters in this same book. And here's an interesting verse that we hear here. Because we always like to quote the New Testament, but little do we like to reflect on the idea that the New Testament is nothing but commentary on the Old. These are interesting words because I know a few weeks ago you went over this exact thing, double-mindedness. Their heart is divided. Now shall they be found at fault. He shall break down their altars and spoil their images. Let's break this down a little bit here. So we're talking about the divided kingdom again. We did that in Jonah. We're doing that now. We got Judah, the southern kingdom, protecting the line of Christ eventually, which has Judah and Benjamin. I studied that. It was Benjamin. That combines the southern kingdom, which is interesting that those are the two children. That was from Rebecca, right? Yeah, Sinar. They keep echoing, but we get that. Yeah, two from the woman he really wanted. Interesting that that's the line that's protected. And then the other 10 are up here being called Ephraim. The kingdom's divided. Divided heart. This is a wake-up call for the entirety, northern and south.
And they're all siblings.
Yeah. They should know. And even previously throughout Kings, there was even this time where the king of the south said to the king of the north, can we go celebrate Passover together? Please have peace. We're seeing this dividedness. It is also extremely interesting because back in Deuteronomy there is a little law, and we sit here and think the Deuteronomy laws are really weird, but it's to produce a peculiar people. It's to produce these people that don't look like everyone else. It's to have foreshadowings of the kind of kingdom and what God wants. I think it's weird. It's like, oh, please don't stitch two different kinds of cloth together. Like, who really does that? It's like, yeah, because that was a tradition of other religion. You see in Deuteronomy a very interesting little rule about two different kinds of seeds being in the land. We're seeing two different kingdoms. Can I find Deuteronomy? No, I've already shouted. Exodus, Leviticus.
Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Thought it was a part of back there. That's the trouble of looking through multiple different Bibles. Then you're just like, where's the ballpark for them? Okay, Deuteronomy 22, verse 9. Interesting little law. Thou shalt not sow thy vineyard with diverse seeds, lest the fruit of the seed which thou hast sowed and the fruit of thy vine shall be defiled. Why is he doing that? Exactly what's being told here in Hosea 10:12. Divided heart. You plant two different seeds in your rows here. You're kind of divided on what I'm going to have for supper in a couple months. Want potatoes or do I want corn? Sometimes it really don't work out. You kind of choke each other out. You gotta have your mindfulness, and this law is only for the land of Israel. If you own property out of Israel, you do other things. But Israel's supposed to be one-minded, one kingdom, one God, all these things. Focused. They split. It's just interesting, divided heart. And they are, because they're in and out. They want the religious concept, but they don't want true God. This idea of they're at fault. It's like a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways, unstable. He called them a deceitful bow earlier, which means you pull back the string and it breaks. How good is that being out hunting up in your tree stand, you cock back your crossbow and just go, boom. The deer hears this probably and is about to skedaddle. You have lost your meal. Deceitful bow ain't very useful because it's when it's tested, put some pressure on the string and don't stand up. And that's what happens when you're double-minded, that you don't have that strength. withstand the testing. Okay, let's go to verse 3 in chapter 10. For now they shall say, For now they shall say, we have no king because we feared not the Lord. All caps. Personal name of God. We did not fear Yahweh. So what should a king do to us? Look at that disrespectful stance. It's like a kid saying, well, I don't fear my parents, so what is a teacher going to do to me? What's a police officer going to do to me? It's exactly that. So if God is supposed to be in control, what good's a king? So we go on further into 4. And they have spoken words, swearing falsely and making a covenant. Because we're supposed to promise these things to God, right? And they're kind of going back on these things. We make a lot of promises to God when we want to get us out of a hole. God, if you get me through this, you get really sick, you get stomach flu going on. If I make it, God, I'll show up on Sunday, I promise. You know that's true, though.
Yep. I'll serve you the rest of my life.
If I don't get caught for stealing this, I can pocket the money. I'll show up on Sunday. I'll turn my life around completely. Swearing falsely. Double-mindedness. Okay. Now judgment. Okay. And thus judgment spreadeth up like hemlock in the furrows of your field. A lot of weird words. Okay, we're getting more farming imagery right here. And when you're going to plow the ground, and there's going to be a mound in the middle, and that's where you sink your seed in. The dip beside that mound is the furrow. So you're planting your seed in the mound, but in the sides, other stuff spring up. It reminds me a lot of Revelation when it comes to the idea of the wheat and the tares. But hemlock is notorious. That should be a familiar sounding name. That's a notorious poison. This is the assassin's choice. Because it don't affect the taste of what you put it in very well. It actually makes it a little sweet. So you get some, I don't know if they powder it up or if it's an oil or something like that. You get that, you slip it in someone's wine and you walk out. Someone's going to be dead. Because it thins your blood.
And that's why they have cupbearers.
Cupbearers, really?
Cupbearers.
Cupbearers,
You
yeah.
have to taste before to eat
Yeah.
and drink.
Wood, you're going to take a sip. So, and then, hopefully you treated them well because they would be the best person to... That's good. It's fine. But, yeah, the hemlock, but it's this idea of you swear falsely, and then you're shocked that judgment comes up. You didn't mean what you said. Those were hollow words. There wasn't true repentance. So sin, death, poison is going to enter your life. And this commentator, because I'm running out of time a little bit, this commentary is talking about, and this has got to be written, I'm trying to get the context, because this guy was born in like 1920. I'm trying to get a good guess on when, 60s, 70s, maybe this was out, to get the context of this. But he's talking about, in their day and age, there's a lot of everyone speaks a lot of words. I'm talking about radio, that's why you can tell it's a little old there. Radio, television, and the printed page. This is the generation that's talked the most. And I'm sitting here and I'm writing in the corner. That's hysterical because we got the internet, blogs, vlogs, Facebook, Instagram. We got more ways to talk, run our mouth, and mean nothing.
Yep.
We actually got anonymity, which means no one can tell who we are, so we can run our mouth to whomever, act so big, and then if someone finds our IP address and shows up to our house, I'm sorry for every word I've said about you. But like, if he's talking about back in the day when radio was a big thing, probably before color TV was a thing, that they just did nothing about talk and never meant anything. A lot of you are pulling up your phones and looking at printed word, aren't you? Hopefully it's the Word of God. Exactly, but a lot of people you see standing in line to clock out.
Checking Instagram.
Facebook. For crying out loud, we can't have pictures anymore. We got to slap words on them too. We call them memes. A lot of words that we don't mean. So, yeah, this guy's. Yeah, he's sitting here and saying it's like 99.44% of what back then is like, it doesn't mean nothing. It's completely empty words. Look at how bad it is now. We got fake news. I could go into, there is fake news, but we talk so much that we have to make up stuff to not mean. So sad. He even goes to talk about that concept of swearing falsely. He goes into this, and I find it funny because back then, and it's probably more frequent now, says, there are some Christians that say today that it is terrible that we don't ask people to put their hand on a Bible anymore, and they swear to tell the truth in a courtroom. Frankly, this guy says, and I love the way he puts it, frankly, I'm glad that the Bible is being left out of it. If you're going to lie anyway, all an oath is on the Bible will do would be to blaspheme the book. If the Bible means nothing to people, why in the world should you use it? I recently seen someone put their hand on a Bible and swear to tell the truth and then hear them lie. If it means nothing, if it's not the cornerstone, because it's supposed to be swearing on the Bible because it's the cornerstone of our legal system. Because we know that the Torah and the Old Testament and a lot of the Ten Commandments is the basis for a stable society. Secular people can see the value in it. But you don't value it, so why on earth are you swearing on? This is pretty much bad mouthing it. I think that's pretty good. There. I know it's not the best place to end off, but that's what time I got. And we'll pick up on chapter 10, verse 5. Hopefully sometimes this month, but overtime's pretty bad. Hey, if I could quit my job, I would. I'm out of vacation days. Oh, yes.
The separation of the two tribes, weren't they the first to go over when they came from Egypt too? Didn't they get their land first and they divided the land?
They did.
Are they the Judah versus?
They weren't divided in any sense. Probably, I'd assume Judah would have went over because of them being the older, but like I'm not for sure off the bat. I know the kingdoms weren't divided at that point. That's even before they established kingdoms, was them going over. So I'm not for sure on that, but I can study it to see. You want to know what tribe went over first? Where
They're the ones that are actually Judah versus.
I'm talking about the ones that crossed over the Jordan.
They got their land first and
They would have been a whole. It would have been Israel as a whole. It wasn't divided until way later. Because if it was a tribe thing, like if Judah was the first tribe to go over, that would be a different question, but it was before any of the kingdoms. So I can't disregard any of them as first. But I know, like, eventually Manasseh becomes like a half tribe that's part of the land and part out of the land. It's interesting.